Hi friends, Brittany here with you once again as we continue our walk through the book of Acts. This week we're in chapter 14. Today I'll be talking about verses 14 through 20. Paul and Barnabas are continuing their travels, as we've learned this week from Patrick and Edry and Tyler. They got into a bit of trouble in Iconium. They visited Lystra, where they got into a different kind of trouble. They healed a man and then were mistaken as Greek gods in human form, the gods of Zeus and Hermes, due to a folk story that circulated in the area. And now the people are going to offer sacrifices to the gods, to Paul and Barnabas, aka Hermes and Zeus. And Paul and Barnabas hear about this and they come out, and of course they're distraught and they've ripped their garments, and they try to talk the people down, and they successfully do it. They tell the people that that they're here to preach the gospel, that these people should turn from these things to a living God, that this living God created heaven and earth and sea and all the things in them. And not only is this God a creator, but this God is a sustainer God. He is the one that gives you rains from heaven and fruitful seasons, that he satisfies your hearts with food and gladness. And it says that they were able with difficulty to restrain the crowds from offering sacrifice to them. Great. And then Jews come from Antioch and from Iconium, and they win over the crowds, and they stone Paul, and they drag him out of the city, supposing him to be dead. Paul is not dead. Verse 20, but while the disciples stood around him, he got up and entered the city. The next day, he went away with Barnabas to Derbe. Just for the record, I don't know if I'm saying these place names correctly. D-E-R-B-E, Derbe. It's easy to gloss it. Like there's a lot of action in this story. There's a healing, there's stoning, they're talking about God and the gospel and the good news. And everything is exciting and everything is wonderful, scary. But there's a lot. When I first was given this segment, I wondered why we went all the way to 20, why we didn't stop, at 18 when we restrained the crowds from offering the sacrifice. And the more I read it, that last little clause, the last sentence, the next day he went away with Barnabas to Derbe. So Paul is stoned. Well, let's recap. Paul heals a man who has been lame his whole life. And then Paul is mistaken for a god, a literal deity, a god on Mount Olympus, part of the pantheon, a god. And then he convinces a crowd that he's not that god. And then he is stoned almost to death. And then he gets up and he has a good night's sleep, hopefully. And the next day, he does it again. He keeps going. He continues the work. The next day, he went away with Barnabas to Derbe. And give you a little hint, they keep preaching. After they preach the gospel in that city, they go back to these other towns. Can't stop, won't stop. Hashtag. That's Paul and Barnabas right now. And that's a little bit what we need. It's been a long year, right, guys? It was a long spring, and it was a long summer, and we're staring down the barrel of a long fall. I'm looking at my ministry here for the church and what I can do for our children and our families. I'm looking at my own children and how I can successfully homeschool them and give them the enrichment and the quality of life that they need. I'm looking at my own school. I'm going into my third and final year of my seminary experience. feels a little bit like I might have been stoned and dragged out of the city. And tomorrow, I'm going to get up and I'm going to go with Barnabas to Derbe. And I don't always know how I'm going to do that. I don't have those kind of answers for you. I'm sorry if you were hoping I was going to tell you the secret of how you continue to get up. I don't know. But I do. And that gives me hope. The fact that I get up every day and I keep doing the very best that I can gives me hope. And the fact that that's a biblical tradition that I can look to gives me hope. So what do I know? How does Paul do it? What do we know? Just from this story, how does Paul do it? How does he get up every day and live into God's vision for the world? He believes that the living God created the world, made the heaven and the earth and the sea and all that is in them. And Paul believes that God gives us rains from heaven and fruitful seasons. He believes that God satisfies our hearts with food and gladness. And because of that belief, he gets up day after day and lives into the vision of the kingdom of God. We talk a lot, I wish we talked more about spiritual practices here in the church. And that is my encouragement for you today. Do you have a spiritual practice that will sustain you after you've been stoned? That will allow you to get up the next day and travel with Barnabas once again? That will allow you day after day to do the work that God has put before you? If you don't have a spiritual practice, if you don't have a prayer life, if you don't have a way to plug in to the love and glory and mercy and grace of God, please reach out to us. Ask us for help. We would love, love, love to share with you our favorite spiritual practices. Don't try to do this alone. Let God help you. And through God, do the work to help others. I hope that you're well. I miss you. I miss your faces and I miss your hugs. And I long for the day that we can be together once again. Stay well. Bye.